I never thought much about working nights at McDonald's. It wasn't glamorous, and it sure as hell didn't pay enough, but it was steady. That mattered more than anything at the time. Bills stacked up fast, and I needed hours that wouldn't interfere with classes during the day. So, when the manager asked if I'd be willing to cover the graveyard shift, midnight to 6, I said yes without hesitation. At first, it was fine. Most nights were dead quiet. A few cars through the drive-thru, a straggler or two wandering inside. But for the most part, it was me, the fryer humming, the fluorescent lights buzzing, and the smell of stale grease clinging to everything. Still, there was something about the building after midnight. The silence wasn't like the calm of an empty library or the stillness of a deserted street. No, this silence pressed down on me, like the walls themselves were holding their breath. The first week, I shrugged it off as paranoia. Sleep deprivation messes with your head, and being alone in a fast food restaurant at 3 in the morning isn't exactly natural. But things started small, little things that I couldn't explain, like the bathrooms. We had these heavy stall doors, painted a dull beige. More than once, I'd swear I heard them creak open when I knew no one else was inside. I'd peek in, and the stalls would be empty. The mirror over the sinks sometimes seemed to ripple, like heat waves rising from asphalt, though the air was always icy from the overworked AC. Then there was the fryer timer. It beeped randomly, like someone dropped a basket of fries when no one had touched it. Sometimes I'd find baskets dipped into the oil, hissing and bubbling. At first, I blamed the other workers for forgetting to reset them before leaving. But one night, I was sure, positive, that I'd emptied the vat, cleaned it, and shut it off. An hour later, it was on again, oil popping, baskets lowered, fries sizzling away that I never put in. I told myself I was imagining things. Maybe I was. But then the customers started coming in. Or maybe I should say, the wrong customers. The first time was a Tuesday, dead night. I was sitting at the counter, scrolling through my phone, when the door chimed. My head jerked up, surprised. Nobody ever came inside after midnight. Usually, it was just the drive-thru. The guy who walked in looked off. He was tall, way too thin, his skin pale like he hadn't seen the sun in years. His clothes were wrong too, like old-fashioned. Not thrift store vintage, but genuinely out of another time. A wrinkled button-up tucked into slacks that were too short at the ankles, scuffed black shoes, a bowler hat. He didn't order right away, just stood there, staring at the glowing menu behind me. His eyes didn't move. They stayed locked on a single spot, like he wasn't even reading the words. Can I help you?" I asked. Slowly, his eyes flicked to me. I swear they weren't the right color. Not brown, not blue, not hazel. Just a washed-out gray, almost the same as his skin. He smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "Coffee," he said. His voice was flat, monotone. I nodded quickly and rang it up. He paid in coins, old ones, silver pieces I'd never seen before. I slid them into the till, unsettled, but I wasn't going to argue. Money was money. When I handed him the cup, his hand brushed mine. It was ice cold. Not the kind of cold you get from being outside in winter. No, this was deeper, like he'd been dead and buried underground. He didn't sit down, just stood there, sipping, staring at me over the rim of the cup until I busied myself in the back. When I finally worked up the nerve to look again, he was gone. No door chime, no footsteps, just gone. That should have been enough for me to quit right then, but I told myself it was nothing. Maybe he'd slipped out while I was distracted. Maybe the coins were foreign. Maybe the AC just made his skin feel cold. But deep down, I knew something wasn't right. And then the nights got worse. The man with the gray eyes wasn't the last strange customer. A few nights later, the drive-through headset crackled. Normally, the voices came in muffled, but clear enough to understand. This time, it was just static, like someone breathing through a radio. I pressed the button. "Welcome to McDonald's. Can I take your order?" The static stopped. Then, a voice whispered, too faint to be real. "Are you alone?" I froze, the hair on my arm standing up. I pulled the headset off and glanced at the monitors. No cars in line, no headlights on the lot. When I put the headset back on, the line was dead. I spent the rest of the shift jumping at shadows. At one point, I could have sworn I saw someone standing by the play place window, the old indoor playground we'd closed years ago. The colorful tubes and slides sat behind dusty glass, half torn down, but I saw a small shape pressed against the window, watching me. I unlocked the door and flicked the lights inside. The place was empty. Dust swirled in the beams, the faint smell of plastic and mildew hanging in the air. No footprints on the floor. That night, I started keeping the radio on. Static, music, anything to drown out the silence. One Saturday, I thought I'd gone crazy for real. It was around 3:30 a.m., the deadest part of the shift. I was restocking the sauces in the back when I heard the front bell chime. I walked up to the counter, but nobody was there. Then I heard the soft squeak of sneakers. A little kid's laugh echoed from the dining area. "Hello?" I called. No answer. I circled the tables, looking under the chairs. Nothing. But when I turned back, every Happy Meal box we kept stacked near the register had been scattered across the floor. Not just knocked over, arranged, formed into a crude circle. I picked one up, my heart hammering. It was damp. Not with soda, not with water. Something darker, sticky. My fingers came away red. Ketchup, I told myself. Just ketchup. But when I lifted the box to my nose, it didn't smell like ketchup. It smelled like copper. I shoved the boxes back into a pile, my hands shaking. That was the first time I thought about quitting. Still, I kept coming back. Stupid, I know, but I couldn't afford to lose the paycheck, and every time I convinced myself there had to be a logical explanation. Maybe some drunk kid snuck in and I didn't see him. Maybe one of the closing crew left the ketchup packets open and they leaked. But the excuses started falling apart. The fryer wasn't just cooking food on its own anymore. Sometimes when I walked past the oil, I saw faces reflected in it. Not mine, not anyone I knew. Just pale, distorted faces bubbling on the surface, opening their mouths like they were screaming, but no sound came out. The freezer door started sticking too. When I pulled it open, I'd feel resistance, like someone was pulling from the other side. Inside, the air would rush past me, colder than it should have been, and I'd hear whispers echoing off the walls. Not words, just hissing, layered, like 10 voices at once. One night, I dropped a box of frozen patties, and when I bent to pick them up, I swear I saw bare footprints in the frost on the floor. Small, like a child's, leading deeper into the freezer. But the further I followed, the quicker they faded, until the trail just stopped halfway through. I ran out and slammed the door shut, breathing hard. The other employees started noticing things too. Rosa, one of the morning workers, asked me why the bathroom mirrors were always streaked, like someone had run wet hands down them. I never admitted I'd been scrubbing handprints off every morning before leaving, handprints too high for any normal person to reach. Miguel, who worked evenings, swore he left the back door locked, but I'd find it cracked open when I started my shift. The cameras never caught anyone going in or out. We all joked about the place being haunted, but I could tell the others were getting uneasy. Nobody wanted to stay late. Nobody wanted to cover nights. That's how I ended up alone so often. The manager brushed it off. Old building. Weird stuff happens. Don't worry about it. But I was worrying. More than that, I was starting to dread going in. I'd park my car out front and just sit there for 5 minutes, staring at the glowing golden arches, my stomach twisting, convincing myself to go inside. It felt like the building was waiting for me. The final straw came the night I saw the man again. The same pale guy with the gray eyes. It was close to dawn. I was counting the register when I heard the door chime. My head snapped up, and there he was, standing in the same spot as before. This time, he didn't order. He didn't speak. He just raised his hand slowly and pointed toward the play place window. I turned. Through the glass, I saw shapes moving in the dark tubes. Dozens of them, crawling, writhing, pressing against the plastic until it bulged. Small hands slapped against the cloudy windows, leaving smears behind. When I spun back, the man was gone. The play place went still, and the door behind the counter, leading down to the basement we never used, creaked open all on its own. I should have walked out the night the basement door opened. Every instinct told me to. Nobody ever went down there. It wasn't on the blueprints, not on the cleaning schedule, not part of the store as far as anyone knew. But the door was real. Heavy, steel, a chipped handle. And it shouldn't have been open. I stood frozen behind the counter, my breath coming out shallow. The door yawned wide enough to show nothing but darkness, the kind that looks thicker than it should, like water waiting to swallow you. I told myself not to look, just close it, lock it, and get the hell out. But my legs moved anyway, carrying me around the counter, across the tile, and down to the threshold. The air coming up was damp. It smelled like rot, like wet concrete and old meat. I reached in and fumbled for a light switch. My fingers brushed the wall, cold and slimy, like condensation had soaked into it. No switch, just stone. That was the first time I heard them clearly, the whispers. They rose from the dark below, layered and hushed, dozens of voices speaking at once. Not English, not any language I recognized, but the sound slithered into my head, made my skin prickle, like the words weren't meant for my ears. I slammed the door shut so hard the frame rattled. My hand shook as I shoved the bolt across. For the rest of the shift, I kept glancing over my shoulder, half expecting it to swing open again. It never did. But the whispers followed me home. The days blurred together after that. I stopped sleeping. When I closed my eyes, I saw the play place writhing with pale shapes, the oil bubbling with faces, the freezer trails leading deeper into dark. I tried telling my manager about the basement door. He frowned, confused. "What basement door?" he asked. "The one behind the counter," I said. "There's no door there. Just the storage closet," I insisted, dragging him to the spot. But when we stood there, all that stared back at me was a blank wall of tile. No seam, no hinges, no door. My stomach dropped. I could see the greasy fingerprint I'd left on the wall the night before, but the steel was gone. The manager gave me a look like I'd lost my mind. "You need rest, man." "Graveyard's rough." I nodded mutely, but I knew what I'd seen. After that, the customers got worse. They didn't always look wrong at first glance. Sometimes they looked perfectly normal. But when I rang up their orders, I'd glance back and see their reflections in the counter glass lagging behind, moving slower than their bodies. Or their mouths wouldn't sync with the words they spoke. One woman leaned close to the register and whispered, "It's hungry," before smiling like she hadn't said anything. A kid in a hoodie ordered fries, and when I handed them over, his hood slipped back just enough to show a gaping hole where his face should have been. Not bloody, not torn, just a smooth, blank oval of skin. I dropped the tray, backing up so fast I nearly tripped. But when I blinked, he was gone. The fries were still sitting on the counter, untouched. The drive-thru became its own nightmare. Voices that didn't belong to anyone would come through the headset. Sometimes they repeated my words back to me in distorted echoes. Other times they laughed, high and childlike. Once, a car pulled up, an old rusted sedan I'd never seen before. The headlights cut through the dark, but when I leaned out the window, there was no one inside. The engine idled, the radio inside crackled with static, and the steering wheel turned itself, slowly, as though unseen hands gripped it. Then the car rolled forward, out of sight. I rushed to the back door, trying to see where it went, but the lot was empty. I started bringing my phone out more, trying to record what I was seeing. But the videos never showed anything. Where there should have been a customer, there was empty air. Where there should have been a reflection, the glass stayed dark. Worse, sometimes the recording showed things I hadn't seen in person. In one video, I watched myself bagging food, only to see a pale hand stretch out from the fryer and stroke my arm. I hadn't felt it at the time. In another, I walked past the freezer, and the door behind me opened on its own. A shape leaned out. Thin, lanky, its head brushing the ceiling. I dropped the phone and refused to look at the footage again. The breaking point came during a thunderstorm. It was close to 2 a.m. The rain battered the windows, the lights flickered, and I felt the kind of heavy pressure that comes before something bad happens. I was mopping the lobby when the power cut out. Total darkness. Only the red glow of the fryers and the dull hum of the emergency lights remained. The door chimed. I froze, gripping the mop handle like a weapon. Lightning flashed outside, illuminating the glass walls for a split second. In that flicker, I saw the dining room filled, every table occupied. Pale faces turned toward me. The light faded, and they were gone. But the smell remained. Copper, decay, damp earth. My knees nearly buckled. I forced myself behind the counter, my breath ragged, clutching the mop like it would help. That's when the PlayPlace lights flickered on, though the breaker box was dead. Inside, shapes crawled out of the tubes, dozens of them, pale and childlike, their eyes black pits. They pressed their faces to the glass, mouths opening and closing soundlessly. Behind me, the steel door creaked open again. The whispers poured out, louder this time, overlapping, hissing my name. I wanted to run. God, I wanted to, but my legs wouldn't move. My body locked, trembling, as if something had reached into my chest and taken control. Then the storm outside boomed. The lights surged back, and everything vanished. The play place was empty. The door was just tile again, but the mop handle was wet in my hands, dripping with something dark, thick, and red. Not water, not rain, blood. That was when I realized I wasn't dealing with hauntings. This wasn't just some ghost story. Something lived here, something hungry, and it wanted me. I didn't quit after that storm. I should have. Every night shift I worked after felt like volunteering to step into a nightmare I couldn't wake up from. But something had hooked into me. It wasn't just fear anymore. It was compulsion. I'd sit in my car before the shift, hands gripping the steering wheel so hard my knuckles turned white, telling myself to drive away. But the longer I sat there, the more I felt pulled. Like invisible strings tugged at my chest, drawing me toward the glowing arches. And when I stepped inside, the whispers would quiet, as if I'd given them what they wanted. That was when the dreams started. I'd collapse into bed after my shift, exhausted, and wake up gasping, drenched in sweat. Always the same dream. I was standing in the play place. The tube stretched endlessly, curling like intestines, dripping with grease. Children's laughter echoed, but the voices were wrong. Low, guttural, almost insect-like. A shadow moved inside the slides, growing larger each time the dream returned. And always, I woke up with the smell of fryer oil and blood in my nose. The other workers started avoiding me. "Man, you look like hell," Rosa said one morning, eyeing the dark circles under my eyes. Miguel joked that I was turning into one of the night customers. His laugh was forced. I overheard them whispering about me near the back room. They said I smelled like grease and metal, even off the clock. That I sometimes stared too long without blinking. Maybe they were right. The lines between me and the place were blurring. The next incident happened in the freezer. I went in to grab a box of nuggets. The moment the door shut behind me, the light flickered and the hum of the fan cut out. The silence was suffocating. Then I heard it, the sound of small feet pattering across the frost. I spun around. Dozens of children stood there, their bodies pale blue with cold, their eyes black voids. Their mouths opened, and the whispers spilled out, filling the freezer with a chorus that rattled my bones. "It's hungry," they hissed together. I backed against the shelves, my breath fogging in the freezing air. My hands numbed, my lungs ached. The children reached for me, their fingers too long, their nails scraping frost off the metal shelves. I screamed and shoved forward, barreling through them. My body hit the freezer door, which burst open like it had never been locked. I fell onto the kitchen floor, gasping. When I turned back, the freezer was empty. But the frost where their feet had been remained. Hundreds of small, bare footprints etched into the ice. I tried to tell myself I was losing my mind, that none of this was real. But then came the proof I couldn't deny. One night, I walked into the lobby and stopped cold. Every Happy Meal box in the restaurant was stacked into a tower, reaching almost to the ceiling. Perfectly balanced. Impossible. The smell of copper hung thick in the air. Before my eyes, the tower shivered. Slowly, the boxes toppled outward, arranging themselves on the floor into a shape. A circle. Inside the circle, words appeared in ketchup. Or what I thought was ketchup. Come down. My stomach flipped. Down. The basement. The next night, I swore I wouldn't go near it. But it didn't matter. The place was pushing me there. Every sound seemed to come from behind the counter now. The fryer hissed like a whispering voice. The play-place glass reflected shadows moving where there was nothing. And the wall behind the counter, it wasn't a wall anymore. The steel door was back. This time, it was wide open. The dark yawned like a throat waiting to swallow me. I stood there for what felt like hours, staring, my feet rooted. Then I heard it. A single word, spoken clearly in a child's voice. My name. The sound slid through me like ice water. Before I realized what I was doing, I stepped inside. The air down there was damp, heavy. My shoes squeaked against stone steps slick with moisture. The whispers grew louder, echoing off the walls, pulling me deeper. The stairs twisted down farther than the building should have allowed. Each turn revealed more dripping concrete, more shadows. My phone flashlight barely cut through the dark, but it was enough to show the walls. Handprints, thousands of them, smeared in dark stains. Some small, like children's, others larger, deformed, with too many fingers. My light flickered. I nearly dropped the phone when the beam landed on a figure at the bottom of the stairs. It was the man, the pale one with gray eyes. He stood motionless, smiling that same empty smile. "You came," he said. His voice wasn't flat anymore. It was layered, dozens of tones speaking at once, like the whispers had all gathered in his throat. I wanted to turn and run, but my legs betrayed me, carrying me down step after step until I was standing before him. The man raised his hand and pointed past me. I turned. The stairs were gone. Behind me stretched only darkness, pulsing like it was alive. And in that darkness, something breathed. I don't remember how I got out. One moment, the man's gray eyes swallowed me, the whispers flooding my head until I thought my skull would split. The next, I was on the floor behind the counter, my uniform soaked in sweat, the steel door sealed shut again. The clock read 5:47 a.m. My shift was almost over, but I knew then I wasn't going to survive this job. I didn't quit. That's the part that eats at me the most. I could have walked out that morning, never come back, pretended none of it had ever happened. But I didn't. Maybe I was scared of losing the paycheck. Maybe I wanted answers. Or maybe the place had already sunk its hooks too deep into me, dragging me back no matter what I wanted. By the time the next shift came, I didn't even resist. I just drove to the store like I always did, parked beneath the humming golden arches, and stepped into the fluorescent glow. The air felt heavier that night. The whole building pulsed with a low hum, like a living thing breathing around me. And the door, the steel one, was waiting, wide open. The first few hours passed in a blur. I don't even remember if any real customers came through. If they did, I couldn't tell them apart anymore. Their faces blurred, their voices layered. I served them automatically, hands moving, lips muttering the same empty lines. but my eyes never left the open doorway. At 3 a.m., the fryer shut off by itself. The lights dimmed, and I heard the voice again, high, childlike, echoing through the restaurant. My name. I set the headset down and walked toward the basement. The stairs were slicker this time, the air hotter, ranker. The whispers pressed against me from all sides. My flashlight sputtered, barely holding back the dark. The pale man wasn't waiting this time. Instead, I saw the children. They lined the steps, their pale faces turned toward me, their eyes nothing but pits. Their mouths opened in unison, spilling whispers so loud the stones seemed to vibrate. My name, over and over. I stepped past them, though their cold hands brushed my arms, my legs, my chest. They weren't trying to stop me. They were guiding me down. The basement opened into a cavern. It was massive, far bigger than the building above. The floor was wet stone, slick with grease and something thicker. The walls pulsed faintly, like veins in flesh. And in the center stood the play place. Not the one from upstairs. This one was wrong. The tubes writhed, stretching into the darkness like roots, dripping with oil and blood. The slides twisted like intestines. The ball pit churned as though something massive stirred beneath. Dozens of children crawled in and out, their limbs bending wrong, their bodies jerking like marionettes. And above it all, perched on the tallest slide, was the man. His gray eyes glowed faintly in the dark. His mouth opened, and the whispers poured out, flooding the cavern. "It's hungry," he said. The floor trembled. Something massive shifted beneath the stone. The ball pit split open as a slick, black shape rose. It wasn't a child. It wasn't a man. It wasn't anything I could name. It was all of them at once, a shifting mass of pale limbs and faces, some screaming, some laughing, all writhing together in a single endless body. Grease dripped from it like sweat, sizzling where it hit the stone. The whispers stopped. Every voice in the cavern went silent. And in that silence, I heard it breathe. Deep, slow, hungry. I don't remember choosing to move, but suddenly I was running. Not up the stairs, not toward the exit. Toward it. The mass shifted, opening like a mouth, and I dove in. Darkness swallowed me whole. I woke up behind the counter. The store looked normal again. The fryers hummed. The AC buzzed. The clock read 5:59 a.m. I thought, for one insane moment, that it had all been a dream. Then I looked down. My hands were covered in grease and blood. My uniform clung to me, soaked through. And when I caught my reflection in the counter glass, my eyes weren't my eyes anymore. They were gray. I don't know how many shifts I've worked since. Time doesn't move right here anymore. Some nights I serve real customers. Other nights, it's only them. The pale children, the whispering things, the faceless ones who drink coffee from cups that vanish when I blink. I don't question it now. I'm part of it. The arches glow every night, a beacon calling the hungry in. And I serve them because that's what I am now. The night shift, the thing in the basement, the hunger in the play place. I am McDonald's, and I am never clocking out.